You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmond Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. You may find all your sales and rental equipment needs at McAllister.com. We are pleased to announce our podcast is now a member of the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You can find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle and me at leadersandlegends.net. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is Vice President and Director of Athletics for Butler University, Barry Collier. Coach, thank you for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Is coach still the preferred salutation? Is once a coach, always a coach?
I've been called much worse. And yes, I appreciate the association with coaching. I'm here I'm called a number of things, but coach is one of the nicer ones.
Is that something, we'll get into your background quite a bit and talk about growing up and how you fell in love in basketball, but was coaching something you've always wanted to do?
Well, ever since I got so deep into sports as a young boy, and especially in high school, that's probably where I found a strong interest and admiration for coaches that I had been under in high school, and that continued through college and led me into the field. But I originally wanted to be a fighter pilot in the Air Force. But at 6'7", that's not really the makeup for at that time anyway. So unlike my three brothers, I wasn't able to do that.
So your three brothers do what?
Be Air Force pilots. Two older, one younger. A couple of them went to the Air Force Academy, and my dad was in the Air Force for a long time. So anyway, that was kind of a natural family, motivation to do that, or examples of people doing that. And I was actually in ROTC as a freshman in college, but I sat for the physical and my legs stuck out too far. That's kind of what you lose. if you're in a cockpit and you eject, you don't want to leave your knees behind. That would be a problem.
And where did you grow up?
Well, as I mentioned, my dad was in the Air Force. I was born in England when they were stationed there in an RAF base in the 50s. And then we moved around a lot, mostly grew up in the Southeast in Atlanta, Georgia, Birmingham, Alabama, and Miami, Florida. And had a great experience of meeting new people on a regular basis when you move around as a kid growing up.
I have been a fan of the Miami Dolphins since Super Bowl VI. You graduated from high school, I'm guessing, right around 1972, 73, 71?
72, you were right on it. I went to Dolphin games at the Orange Bowl, sat in the end zone. And when you go to Dolphin games in Miami, Florida in late August, it could be warm. But those were great teams, as you well know. Great teams.
Did you grow up a Dolphins fan? Did you stay a Dolphins fan until you became a permanent Colts fan, I'm going to guess?
I did, and I have to admit now I follow a lot of teams, especially and including the Colts. But I'm still a Dolphins fan because of memories.
And so you remember the undefeated season in 1972 very, very well.
Absolutely. I was there a couple games. My dad had season tickets. I got to go every once in a while. And we had, at that time, the Dolphins, it was fantastic. But we had a number of Dolphin players that would come and speak to our FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes group at my high school and other Fellowship of Christian Athletes events. I remember having interactions with the Killer Bees and the defensive.
Oh, in the early 80s? Mm-hmm.
No, that was in the
no-name defense in the early 70s with Buonacani and Jake Scott.
Blackwell, and yep, exactly.
Did basketball, playing sports, come natural to you, or was it something that you grew into, for lack of a better term?
I was in youth sports some, but mostly piddled around in it for a long time. And then as I got into high school, or junior high, actually, ninth grade in Miami, Florida, I tried out for the basketball team and got cut. And I ended up on that year on a rec league team, Optimus League with Dad's coaching. But I got the bug and played every day and, dribbled through the park and dribbled home in the dark and all that stuff. And then it became a real obsession to make the team as a sophomore at the high school, now on the JV team. And I remember being pretty much distraught on the night that the cuts were going to come out the next day. But I made it. And I was never a real good player, but good enough to be on a team and play 2 years in junior college and get recruited to Butler. So really fortunate that way. And basketball's a game you can get a lot better at it by yourself with a ball and a hoop, right, if you put in the time.
My father was in the Marine Corps, and my mother was in the Marine Corps.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, it was a delight. But in so many ways, having that bit of my background growing up, I was in the Army for 3 years. My brother was in the Air National Guard for 10. My other brother was in the Army for 3. And then my son actually did 2 tours in Afghanistan. So listening to you talk about the military string in your family, the tradition, how much has that influenced you? And tell the Leaders and Legends audience what it's like to grow up in a military household.
Well, I suppose each household is somewhat different, but I was one of 4 brothers and no sisters in a family that my dad joined the military right as World War II was ending and served during Korea and actually was in Vietnam. He was a navigator, bombardier. And then my oldest brother, who's 7 years older, which is quite a bit, and I have a second brother, older brother, who's just a year older. So he and I were pretty close, still. But my oldest brother went through ROTC and flew in Vietnam. And then the next brother went to the Air Force Academy, and he would tell you he missed the show because he was basically in between conflicts and never served during wartime. And my youngest brother, like your son, sounds like, did 9 different tours to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wow.
In a F-16. So, I've lived through them and of course realized their sacrifice. And every veterans and active duty members sacrifice. So I have tremendous respect for them, and in our family we moved around a lot. And as I said, I was one of four brothers, and so when we would move, we would say that well, we'll fight with each other until we make friends to fight with, and that was our way of adapting because we had each other to lean on. My mom's was a strong woman, and my dad had gone a lot, like lots of fathers during that time, with especially being deployed and so forth. But we my dad was a first generation college student, put himself through after World War II, and we all there were some real good lessons there taught by parents that we were real fortunate to have. So I, every chance I get, I think we all should thank veterans, you and others who have served in our country and given us all the opportunities that we have, protected us along the way. So
thank you for saying that. Thank you. You mentioned going to junior college. Mm-hmm. Why was that your first stop? And then how did Butler get on your radar, and how did you get on its radar?
Well, I was out of high school. I was a strapping 6'4.5" and $185, which, if you do the math, is pretty darn skinny and not very athletic and all that kind of stuff. And at the last minute, I decided to try to play college basketball. I was a 10-point a game, 10 rebound a game, high schooler. So nothing, not recruited, a few letters, but not recruited. And I went to junior college. When I came out of junior college, I was 6'7" and 205, and actually could play a little bit, and at least enough to fool the coach at Butler to recruit me. And I, at that time, I had some choices, and I came to Indiana on the recommendation to visit Butler on my junior college coach, who was from Cincinnati, and knew about Butler and its reputation, and Hinkle Fieldhouse and Tony Hinkle and all that was here. I didn't know those things, but he did. I came up to visit, and I knew Butler was a good school. I'd done my homework there, but I walked in the Fieldhouse, and I like to say my jaw dropped like an egg from a tall chicken. It was my Hoosiers moment where you're yelling Hickory. I didn't yell Hickory at the time because the movie wasn't out yet, but it was.
Have you ever yelled Hickory?
A lot. Still do.
At the Fieldhouse?
Absolutely. I think everybody should. But that's how I ended up there. So I was fortunate to be under some good coaches and some good training. And frankly, weightlifting was kind of a new thing for sports athletes, and at least in our area in the 70s. But I benefited from that the 2 years I was out, and I was a 17-year-old high school grad. So I still had some growing to do once I got to college.
You came up to Indiana right about the time that a school about 50 or 60 miles south of Butler was making its mark, adding to its history. Do you remember those Bob Knight 1975, 1976 IU teams?
I do. We did not play them when I was here at Butler during that time, but I distinctly remember watching on Channel 4 both Purdue and IU games on television during that time, and in black and white largely was the TV that we had at the fraternity house. But there were, and we'd watch the Sunday coaches show, I think it was. It was really interesting, and they got going pretty much right away. And of course, they were national champions in '76. And I did get to play against the seniors on my class, those seniors, in an all-star, couple of all-star games, or with them, I should say, when we played against an Ohio all-star team back in the day. So that was about the extent of it during that time.
I guess it's fair to, and tell me if I'm not correct, but it's fair to say Florida is a football state, and
Yes,
now
that's definitely fair.
and now you're in Indiana, which, aside from a school up in South Bend, has a mixed football legacy at the collegiate level, but at the on the hardwood, that was a completely different story. What was it like to walk into a state or a school where basketball was on everyone's mind seemingly all the time?
Well, it was a significant change from Florida, as you point out, uh, and I ate it up, of course, because I played basketball. So I couldn't get enough of it. And then even later on, when I was coaching at Butler, um, and remember now, and later in the '70s, in the late '70s, ESPN came on, and now you got football, but also basketball during the winter seasons on all the time. So, um, you know, basketball is different here in Indiana. I mean, we do take it, and I'm not saying it's the only place. It's just the best place. I'll say that. And I think it, it's there's a lot of good sports, by the way, but Indiana has long had a passion for basketball that it was easy for me to just get swept up in that.
The Butler you came to in the mid 70s and the Butler that you work at now as director of athletics and vice president seemingly has changed a little bit. What do you think when you walk on campus these days and see some of the places that you first saw when Gerald Ford was president and what you see now?
Well, you can imagine there's a lot of change in that span of time. From 1973 was when I first came to visit the campus in the spring of, I'm sorry, 74, spring of 74. And Butler has grown and changed pretty significantly. It was, like I said, I think I've already said, it was a good school all along. Wasn't as well known. And even when I coached here, Robert, starting in '89, we'd go out recruiting in the summer, and I made sure that, we had great big letters on the front of our T-shirts saying Butler, but I also made sure we had great big letters saying Indianapolis underneath it, because there weren't as many people that knew that where Butler was or what it was, for that matter.
Right.
And that's changed some, relatively significantly. Some of that's come with the successes of the basketball programs, in particular the 2010 and 2011 seasons, where the team got all the way to the final game with Brad Stevens coaching and those really good teams. So, and since then, actually, it's grown more because of being able to join the Atlantic 10 and then the Big East and then the television that comes with all that. It's a real plus for Butler and has helped in its growth. So it's been rewarding to see all of that happen.
After you graduated from Butler, what was your plan and what led you back to your alma mater?
Well, I did want to coach when I came to Butler. I was working to coach. Now I thought I might just as easily be a high school coach or another level coach, junior high coach for that matter. Coach the game of basketball. That's what I was hoping to do. And so you graduate from college and you're just ready to take on the world and be the next John Wooden, and nobody cares. So you find a way. And during the time I was at Butler, my junior college coach, Stan Evans, went to Indiana State as an assistant coach. So he suggested that if I was interested, to come to Indiana State for graduate school that next year and be a graduate assistant in the basketball program. And I ended up doing that. I was also married, still am married, to my sweetheart after my junior year at Butler. So we went to Terre Haute, and I was in grad school, and I was going to be an assistant coach graduate assistant on the Indiana State team. But right before this practice began, Rose Holman had a volunteer opening. That sounds rather strange, doesn't it? But
underpaid or unpaid,
properly paid, right? And so I took that opportunity and worked with John Muchner, who was a really good coach at Rose Holman, and went to school and taught classes at Indiana State as a graduate assistant. Got a master's degree, and then it was Groundhog Day again. Here I am, ready to be the next John Wooden. Nobody cares. What are you going to do? And so that next year, I landed a job, and as I describe it, as one of the great witness protection programs in America, and that is to be an assistant coach at a junior college, because nobody knows who you are. And so that fit right in with this, initial opportunity to go into coaching. So that second year, I worked for a whopping $700 as a stipend for the year to coach. So obviously I had to have other part-time jobs. And then my third year, I landed at the University of Idaho, again in a part-time job, but finally got my nose in the door there and was able to stick in the business for coaching for 30 years.
How long were you at Indiana State?
A little over a year. So I took 2 summers plus the school year to finish the master's degree. One season.
Did you ever see a tall, blonde-haired kid walking across campus and not realize he was going to be one of the greatest players in the history of the game?
Well, actually, when the season began, the basketball seasons that year began, I was over at Rose Holman coaching in the afternoons, and Indiana State was practicing. And as I said, my junior college coach was an assistant coach at Indiana State. So I would teach in the morning and go to class in the morning at Indiana State, and then I'd go over to Rose in the afternoon. And the season began, and this kid from Indiana State is scoring 30 points and averaging 10 rebounds. And I'm like, who does that? I can't believe that. So I asked my coach, and he said, well, you'll have to come see him play. And I said, well, yeah, of course. And I said, does he jump real high? And he said, no. Does he run real fast? No. Is he like a muscle man or something? No. You'll have to come see him play. And so then I did, and it looked like, whoa. And then during the winter break, when Rose Holman was gone for 3 weeks of break, the Indiana State team was practicing that whole time, and I became a practice player. So Larry made me look silly, like he made so many others look silly in it. But at least it was in a practice setting. There wasn't a lot of witnesses.
And were you able to reconnect with him a little bit 30 years later when he's coaching and the president of the Pacers, or running the Pacers on the basketball side, and you're here in Indianapolis at Butler? Did you tell him, like, you remember that one time I rained that jumper on you?
No, we didn't. We really haven't reconnected. Not that we were all that connected back then. Anyway, I don't want to overspeak that. We played on the same softball team for during the summer, and then Terre Haute and all that. But I did have a teammate that the next year, Bird's junior year, I think, or no, maybe it was his sophomore year. Anyway, he was. My former teammate popped off and said he was going to really shut him down, and he went for 44 on him. So
if you're a fan of YouTube, you should look up Nolan Richardson, the former coach of Arkansas. Nolan Richardson's Hall of Fame induction speech. if you've never seen it. If you have, then you'll know what I'm talking about, where Nolan Richardson talks about listening to an Indiana State game on the radio and not knowing who this Larry Bird guy is who is dominating the game. And I'll just leave it at that. So
yeah,
anyone listening to the podcast, just look up Nolan Richardson's Basketball Hall of Fame speech and listen to his thoughts on Larry Bird. It's really funny, actually.
it is.
It must. Have you seen it?
Yes. Really good.
It takes a lot of dedication on the part of everyone, the person, the family, the spouse, to embrace the coaching lifestyle, which in its own way has a lot in common with the military lifestyle of moving from place to place to try to find one place. At what point did you decide this is all worth it, and your family decided we're in it with you, Barry? We want you to achieve your dream? Because there had to have been times, I'm guessing, where you were just like, maybe I should just sell insurance or work at a bank.
Yeah, you nailed it there, Robert. I agree that there are some parallels between the military life and the coaching life. In that year, there's change and moving. I've lived in 17 different places in my life, and I got a few years on me now, so that doesn't sound as much as it used to, because I've not moved as much later in life. But I think actually that's pretty good training for, it's not a bad thing. It's what you make of your circumstance and take advantage of your opportunities, as opposed to, I want to stay in one place all my life. And that's fine too, if that's what it is, the best thing for you. But in that scenario, you need to make the most of your opportunities as well. So I think that there are some parallels there. And my journey and the support of my family was really critical. I almost got out of coaching a couple of times when it got recruiting is very, very hard. And the nights away, there were some weeks when it was 6 and 7 nights a week. And that's really hard, or being gone for weeks at a time during summer recruiting. And nowadays, you're not gone as much. You're gone a lot. You could be gone a lot, but you're on that cell phone all the time now, and
Sure.
Talking, and more so than it used to be, because of the convenience of being able to, have a phone all the time, or the inconvenience if you're on the receiving end of that, maybe. But yeah, so I think that I could not have done whatever I accomplished. I would not have done it without the support of my family. And my wife and I have 3 sons. They're all into it. They're big, huge Butler fans. One's a Butler grad. The other 2 are Nebraska grads, where I was for a period of time. And so anyway, they're some ways we're a sports family, I suppose, but basketball and Butler are part of our family. And we've benefited tremendously from that relationship.
You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmond Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. Our guest today is Vice President and Director of Athletics for Butler University and a graduate of Butler, class of 76, Barry Collier. Barry, is there a Hoosier leader or legend you particularly admire?
There actually are many. And what comes immediately to mind for me is a man that I got to know when he was serving all of us, and got to know him over the years more so. Dick Luger. He actually came and spoke at an event that I was at in college when he was the mayor. And then I visited him when I was coaching Butler. Of course, he was a senator. And we did I don't know if it's a Chevy Chase. We did the Chevy Chase version of the family trip to Washington, D.C. and to see all the monuments and the Smithsonian. And we went to see Senator Lugar at his office, and he, took pictures and was very gracious. When I invited him to a ball game over the, number of games, and he came to one game, and I made him the honorary assistant coach, and he sat right next to me at the game on the bench, and he told me later, he said, I stuck my head in the timeout, and he got asked by the media after the game, what was it like to put your head in the timeout and listen? And he said, well, the language is kind of colorful in there in the timeout. And so he was very gracious. And then if you could see my office here, I have a American flag hanging on the wall behind me that flew over the Capitol of the United States in 2010 as an honor for Butler being in the Final Four. He sent a flag to me and to Brad Stevens and to President Fong. And so I'm very proud of that sitting behind me. And I think of him because, he served for a long time, politics being what they are. And I tend to agree on that side more so, I suppose. But nonetheless, he was a guy that, in my opinion, got a lot done and was, a role model in the way he presented himself and so forth. And so anyway, I would use him as an example. But I thought Gene Cady and Bob Knight and Lou Holtz and
Dave Arland.
Dave Arland, yeah, well, good friend Dave Arland. Those, there are so many people here. Jeff Bannister, Bill Lynch, who's a real good. Actually, Bill Lynch was my teammate here at Butler when I was in school, and of course went on to coach football at a number of Indiana schools and recently retired. Great admiration for him. Bill Sylvester, who coached here and AD here at Butler. So many people I benefited from.
I want to read this and then ask you to comment on it, please. The Butler Way demands commitment, denies selfishness, accepts reality, yet seeks constant improvement while putting the team above self. Has the Butler Way always been the Butler Way? You've been associated with the school for nearly 50 years. Has it changed at all, or is it just better known?
Oh, I would say it's just better known. I think, as you read that and think about it, it's really a way of doing something. It's, it's a path, as we would describe it, a path to success. And I would easily credit Tony Hinkle with coaching and leading with the Butler Way for 50 years in his lifetime, that he's really the father of the Butler Way. Now, we didn't call it the Butler Way back then. It's a more, recent term, but it applies to anybody. We happen to work at Butler and go to school here and so forth. But those things, you think about them, they work in your family life, your faith life, your work life, schools, whatever organization. If you can, do your part and work to improve and put others and help others, those would be pretty good principles. They all happen to be biblical principles, but they've been used by man for thousands of years. And I'd also say, for my growth as a coach, Don Munson, Judd Heathcote, and Dick Bennett had a significant influence on my coaching. And I'd say those principles align with those guys as well. So anyway, for the Butler Way, I'd like to lift up Tony Hinkle every time we talk about that, because he was a grinder and a successful guy with limited resources, that accomplished so much.
In 1989, you became the head coach of Butler University. It had to have been a thrill to walk out into the field house as the head coach, and not just a fan and not just a former player. Do you remember that moment in 1989 when the ball was tipped off for the first time with you as head coach? And what are some of your memories of coaching at Butler? And some of your, I know a few of your probably more signature wins, but is there a game or two that stands out as well?
Well, to look back that far, it's been quite a while now, 30 plus years, but lots of memories of that time. I was an assistant coach for 13 years at 5 different schools before the Butler job opened. Joe Sexton left in '89, and I was out in California at Stanford University as an assistant coach, and one of my fellow assistant coaches out there called me in my room. I remember I was in LA and we were waiting to go to our game for the Pac-10 basketball tournament. And he called and said, "Hey, I just saw on TV the Butler job is open." And I really had never thought much about coming back to Butler, because Butler didn't turn over its coaches very often. And as far as I knew, that wasn't going to be anything anytime soon. But I had been trying to land a head coaching job, and I was relatively young then, still 34 at the time. And anyway, so I tried to get involved in the Butler job. Remember, now we're 1989, limited communication forms at that time. So phone calling was the deal. And I called President Jeff Bannister, who I had learned was basically going to be doing the hiring of that job, not the athletic director. And I couldn't get through. And I'd call again and I couldn't get through. And I'd wait a few days and call again and couldn't get through. The time was going on, so I started calling every day. Couldn't get through. And one day I decided, I'm going to call today. I'm going to get a hold of somebody today. And I would call every day and up to that point, and every time that day, and speak to the secretary, who was as nice as could be, would take a note for me. So the 6th time that I called that day to leave a 6th message, I think I wore her down, because she said, "Just a minute." And apparently she went in the other room and said, "Hey, I'm imagining this, but would you take this call so this guy would stop calling?" Or something like that, right? And then on the phone, she came back on the phone and she said, "Dr. Bannister will talk to you now." And he came on the phone and I was like, okay, here's my shot. I got to give the 9-minute talk in like 90 seconds here, and I'll come up from air afterwards. And I started to give my pitch. And he said, "Barry, I just talked to Judd Heathcote. We're going to bring you in for an interview. We'll call you back." Click. So I wasn't even able to do anything. But I came on the visit and interviewed and fooled them, and they hired me. And I say fooled them because that's really, a lot of that's true. My first year at Butler, you were asking about 89, 90, Thad Mata's on the team. We had some really good kids on the team, and I was not a good coach. And I would readily admit, my first year at Butler, we won 6 games. And at that time, you played 28. So if my math is correct, we lost 22 games. We were 6-22. I have one of the worst records in the time at Butler. Anybody's coaching at Butler. But we immediately turned it around the next year and won 18, then 21, and then kind of kept going and moving it forward. We've had many better coaches than me before and after me. But I learned a lot during that time. and you learn a lot from losing too. I mean, that's one of my things that I think is really important, is to learn from negative circumstances, in part so they don't happen again. But also, it's just part of life. We're not going to be successful in everything that we try. So, but as time went on, we were able to have some success. We were playing Notre Dame every year, one game a year, home 1 year, up in South Bend the next. And we lost maybe like 6 years in a row, and finally we were able to win there, and that was a big win. And in fact, we might have. That was my second year when we did beat them. I believe that's right. And they said, "Is this?" And it was early in the season, maybe the third game of the season, or early in the season anyway. And one of the media people asked me, "Is this one of your biggest wins?" And I said, "Well, are you counting all 6 last year plus the 3 this year?" I didn't have very many wins to compare it against, but nonetheless, that was a big thing. We later on, Coach Knight at IU was willing to play us in Hinkle Fieldhouse as part of a series where we'd play it in Bloomington a couple times, and they'd play here once. And we were able to win a game here where Travis Trice shot the lights out and Jermaine Geis scored 20-something, and it was a great day for Butler that day. There was a lot of red in the building that day because of IU fans, and good for them too. But I remember that win. We played Purdue in the similar scenario. We're not able to beat them, but just gradually, getting better and recruiting and leaning on assistant coaches who made all the difference in the world for our teams. Those are things I remember in those 11 years I was head coach here.
You left Butler to become the head coach at Nebraska. So you go from a basketball state back to a football state. What was that like, and what went into the decision to do something like that? Leave a school you love, your alma mater, a city obviously that you care deeply about. But Nebraska was it in the Big Ten by then? I don't think so. Was it?
Big 12.
Big 12. Okay. So it hadn't matriculated over to the Big Ten. Bigger stage, bigger school, all those things. But it had to be, I'm guessing, a very difficult decision for you.
Yeah, it was. I would say, professional curiosity won the day in that decision, because, and this is not to speak anything ill of Nebraska, but Butler was, my home. But you're curious professionally what it would be like to be at a place where you have 33 people that work in the weight room at Nebraska. We didn't have 33 people in our department at Butler. And the resources that you have in those scenarios are very significant. And it's significant largely because of football success, right? Nebraska football's a juggernaut. And for 2000, when I went there, they had sellouts since 1965. They averaged 9 wins for 40 years. It was unbelievable, the success that they had there. And Tom Osborne was still on the campus at that time. He wasn't the coach at that time, but he's a icon in the sports world, college football world for sure. So anyway, it was very different and difficult personally or individually because of all the stuff that had happened here. Butler gave me a chance in 1989, and 11 years later, it wasn't like I tired of anything. I just was curious about what we might be able to do, because we weren't averaging 4,000 people at our games back, even with the good teams that we had back when I was coaching. And there's great interest, and all of it goes with the resources at a place like that. It's somewhat unimaginable when you do it so broadly like they do in the Big 12 or the Big 10. But it's a different world. And I would say, the cultures of the two places are very similar. Nebraskans and Indiana folks are hardworking, faithful people, and they all love their sports. And when I first went to Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska is about 250,000 people. And somebody asked me the difference between Indianapolis and Lincoln, and I said, well, as far as I can tell, one of the major differences is they have 4 Applebee's, and we had about 16 in Indianapolis. And so, beyond that, it's basketball and recruiting and people. And I love the people there. I still do. I'm looking forward to going to Omaha this weekend when the Dogs play at Creighton.
2006, you came back to be the head of Butler's athletic department. And if I had told you in what you've overseen, not just in basketball, but just on the campus with other sports at the university, would have been hard to predict in a lot of ways. But if I had told you in October 2009, the start of basketball practice for Butler University men's basketball, that you were about to embark on 2 consecutive title game appearances in the NCAA tournament, you would have said,
Robert, you need to see a doctor. I would say that you're a little bit nuts to be predicting that, and yet, you know what? I've always had this belief that you never know. You never, in the outcome of a ball game, you really kind of never know. For one reason, you don't know is because it's in the future, and nobody knows that. Brad Stevens had been our coach for a couple of years by then, and had already won a bunch of games. And I'd love to tell you that I knew he'd be that good, but I'd be a lying sack of something if I said that. So Brad was, and is really, 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 really good coach, even a better person. And the collection of players at that time, the sophomore class with Gordon Hayward and Shelvin Mack and Ron Norad and Matt Howard was ahead of that group, an older player with that team, those teams. They just complemented each other so well. They competed really hard. Nobody was perfect, but that was an amazing run there, and one that created opportunities for Butler University, much less Butler athletics and Butler basketball.
I was actually in the mayor's office for the run in 2010. I'd left by 11. And just to see what it meant to the city, how the city rallied around the team. For the Final Four in Indianapolis, my understanding is, and I believe this is accurate because the national news media found it quaint, for lack of a better term, but the players on the men's basketball team the morning of the final game went to class.
Yeah, shocking, isn't it, that you would go to class when you can go to class? You think about it this way. Part of it is, I don't know of another team that's played in their hometown for decades, right? I think that's maybe happened one other time, maybe when the tournament was in LA one year for UCLA. And I don't know if they went to class, by the way, but we were in our hometown, and it was such a beautiful coincidence for our team to be so good and the tournament to be here, because it just is. It comes to Indianapolis fairly often, but the chances of getting to the Final Four are really difficult, even for the best teams. So that was a confluence of events that really were plus. And I do remember chest bumping with your boss, Mayor Ballard, on Monument Circle when we had a pep rally there in one of the days of that weekend. He was a big fan of Indianapolis, much less Butler, and we enjoyed some time together. But that was it became almost a homecoming that weekend, a spontaneous homecoming for Butler alums who came from all over just to be in the city, much less get to the game if they could. And it was, that really, and then to go back the next year, then I would have really thought you needed to see a doctor if you'd have told me that you're going to do that again next year. I've had several people say, "Well, we gotta go because we'll never get back there." They said that in 2010.
Oh, sure.
Then the next year they were going to Houston again. Like, this must be easy.
I was standing right there on Monument Circle when Colonel Ballard was chest bumping everybody, and finally I laughed and said, if you get put on the ground, all this tough Marine campaign talk is going to be out the window, especially if Bobby Fong does it to you, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Who was a diminutive fellow. What was going through your mind in the split seconds after the ball leaves Gordon Hayward's hand and before it hits off the rim?
Yeah, I like everybody else, things are happening fast there, right? You don't know that he's going to be the Zubak is going to miss the free throw on purpose, and that's what Coach K called for in that case. And you don't know that you're going to get the rebound, even though they're kind of back defending. But the ball seemed like it was in the air a really long time, and I wasn't able to watch. I didn't force myself to watch the replay for several years. I was there, right? I felt that enough when I was there. But they really believed they could win. They had a great chance to win. It was an excellent ball game, and it is not better that we came in second. I've had some people say, "Don't you think?" No.
Who the hell would say that?
Not as a competitor, or that it was still a good thing. It was a good thing to win all the games up to that point. But at the end of the day, we had a really good chance, played, those are hard games to score in, and you really have to be physical and so forth. And even the game I think, has changed a little bit in how it's officiated now, and probably better, because there's allowed a little bit more room to movement. It was more of a wrestling match back then. But those were great. That was a great weekend for Butler University. There's no two ways about that.
As someone who has been in love with basketball for decades and traveled the state of Indiana, has been in here one way or the other since the 1970s, how accurate is the movie Hoosiers?
Well, I know Bobby Plump pretty well. Bobby Plump is the real life Jimmy Chitwood. Bobby Plump went to Milan, was on that team that won it, and Bobby played at Butler with two other teammates from that Milan team. And he said, the feel of the movie is about right, but there was no romance with the coach and the other teacher, Barbara Hershey and Gene Hackman. There was no drunk in the movie. Dennis Hopper played the movie drunk. There was no town drunk that came out on the floor or was a father of a player. He said about the most accurate thing was the shot. And you've probably seen the literal footage of the shot, the real footage of the shot. He said that was about even. And when I first came back to Butler in '89, I asked him which end of the court was it on? And he kind of turned his head and said, "I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure it was on the north end of the court." So anyway, that was pretty interesting of knowing him, and then and I also know that when the movie was here, and they were looking to do the shots from Hinkle, that I'm told by Billy Lynch, who was coaching football here at the time, that nobody here thought this movie would be worth a hoot. And they said, one day the producer said, our director said, we need a locker room. And by that time, the Butler people were kind of fed up with these movie folks that would come in and thinking they own everything. So they said, what rotten locker room can we give them? And they gave them this locker room downstairs, and the movie people said, this is perfect for what we need for this shot. So a little funny. Billy was telling me he didn't think that people at Butler didn't think that the movie would make a dime. Who would watch this movie? But it really is one of the better sports movies out there.
When's the last time you watched it?
Last week. Literally, I watch it multiple times a year. I'm sure I'm in the hundreds. Some of the lines, Dennis Hopper's lines are the greatest, I think. Well, that and I'll make it, and it's time to play ball, and all those good things.
Dentine,
that's right.
We are recording this podcast just a few weeks before, and we're going to post it during the NCAA tournament, the entirety of which is being held in the state of Indiana, with a lot of it being held in the city of Indianapolis. How does that make you feel as an adopted Hoosier? And what is Butler's role in hosting the tournament? And one other question I want to ask, because I know you're on the board of the Indiana Sports Court, but what about the leadership of someone like Ryan Vaughn, who's come on the Leaders and Legends podcast? I've known him for a long time, Ben Davis grad, just a terrific, terrific young leader. How everybody came together to pull this off, to make it happen.
I want to speak to Ryan first because the Indiana Sports Corps has been around a while now and had some really good leaders. But Ryan is simply one of the best in that he's continued to be able to pull things together for the Sports Corps and for Indianapolis in a difficult time, right? And especially now in the almost 12th month of the pandemic. And so very bright, huge collaborator, action-oriented. I think he does a great job. He'd be successful in just about anything. I don't know of anything he wouldn't be successful in. So
he's been successful in everything so far.
Yep. And so no doubt he would be able to do that no matter what. And he's relatively young guys from my standpoint anyway. I could see him accomplishing much more going forward. And I do think it's special that the tournament is all in Indiana. It speaks to us, the thinking of Indianapolis leaders to help the NCAA make its move to Indianapolis back in the 90s, I think it was. And then to have Dan Gavitt now in charge of basketball and figure out a way to have the tournament this year, because there's still a lot of places that probably would say, no, we're not going to let you come here, or we're not going to let you have a game here, or this or that. And so pretty smart idea to try to work with one medical entity of our state. And then as it turns out, more than that, because of the 3 different locations of Bloomington, Lafayette, and Indianapolis, and the medical teams there and leaders there. Very smart idea. And then to try to pull all this off, and I think it's going to happen, and largely without, it's, of course, we're predicting here, but Butler University has been able to have 20 plus games this year at Hinkle Fieldhouse with fans. This is not new to Indiana, much less Indianapolis or even Hinkle Fieldhouse. And you may know this, but we'll have 6 days of games here, first and second round games and Sweet 16 games, 6 different days when we have 12 games through the first and second round and 4 games of the Sweet 16 here at Hinkle. And, we were ready from the day one when we first got asked, would you be able to make this happen? And our answer was yes. And then we had to go figure out how to do that. But we wanted this to happen on multiple levels. One, of course, is just for all the schools in the NCAA and all the student athletes and teams that would have a chance to play for a national championship, which they didn't last year, and all the finances that go with it, of course. But secondly, for Butler University, this is it's a crown jewel type of event in our country, much and even beyond. And a significant part of it's going to be here at Hinkle Fieldhouse and on our campus. And so while we're still dealing with the pandemic and we're not running around licking handlebars or anything, we still got to be safe and take care of each other. But it's a great thing for all the schools that are involved, for the state of Indiana and for Central Indiana. I think it's, we're going to be able to have some fans, not a lot of fans, but some fans, which we just finished a game Sunday with fans at our Villanova game, and even 20%, 25% make a difference. So that'll be good for the student athletes as well. So I just think it's really going to be special. And the teams that get to come to Hinkle and play on our court and in this building, I think are in for a treat as well.
Do you get a chance to, last quick question before I ask the 5 questions with which we end all our podcasts, but do you get a chance to interact with the announcers, whether it's Gus Johnson, Bill Rafferty, Sean I mean, the list goes on and on, right, from ESPN and other places? I get the sense, and I've heard them say it when I've watched games on TV, they love coming to the Fieldhouse to call games.
Yeah, I think I know they do. You're right. In fact, I know that there was a recent comment by Jim Nance, who does games for the NCAA championship, who said, I want to do a game at Hinkle Fieldhouse. And Bill Raftery has done them, and Gus Johnson has done them, and others, many good folks have done them. And if you like basketball, and unless you've got a burr up your saddle, you appreciate Hinkle Fieldhouse for what it is. And, it kind of, to me, it feels like basketball, and I'm biased on the other side of it, right? I love it. But a lot of people have appreciation for the building and the history that's here.
We end all Leaders and Legends podcasts with the same 5 questions of our guests. Our guest today is Barry Collier, Vice President and Director of Athletics for Butler University. Coach Collier, are you ready?
I hope so.
What was your first job?
I was a bag boy at a grocery store in Miami, Florida.
Publix?
Publix is exactly right.
What was your first concert?
I want to say it was Seals and Croft.
Oh, my.
Back in the 70s, right?
It's pretty mellow, Coach. Very mellow.
Well, I didn't. No comment.
Mitch Daniels' first concert was Lovin' Spoonful and the Association at Clues Hall.
All right.
Along with former Marion County prosecutor Terry Curry. They had the exact same first concert.
Wow.
The things you learn.
At Dinner Key Auditorium. No, I'm sorry. It was at the Miami Beach Convention Center in the 70s.
And the Republican National Convention was there. Nixon took the nomination in, I think, 68 and 72. Do you remember that at all?
I do. 72, I do. I was there.
Number 3, if you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you recommend?
If I could only recommend one, I'd recommend the Bible. Absolutely.
Number 4, if you could witness any event in history, be there as it happens, which event would you choose?
You said event, but did you mean sporting event?
I said event, but you can make it a sporting event.
That's not fair. I asked you a question in the middle of the questions. I guess from a sports standpoint, I'd like to be at the center court at the Final Four.
In history, though, if you wanted to witness
an event. In history, I would like to have been at the Constitutional Convention.
That's a popular choice.
Yeah.
Last question. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record, just to chat, whom would you choose? Blue?
Besides my wife.
Blue?
Okay. That's a great question. Not one you get an opportunity to fulfill, do you? But I think I would want to meet with the President of the United States, whoever that was at the time when this availed itself.
You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmond Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. Our guest today has been Vice President and Director of Athletics for Butler University, former coach, Barry Collier. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. It was a fun conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.